You have to truly believe in the magic.
We go from the USA and Germany to the Bleacher Report, and we've got an interesting article on there. And
God bless them.
we love the Bleacher Report at the minute, and it ranked the highest ceilings. We're going to look at the 2021 NBA draft, and it gave honourable mentions to Jalen Green, Sengun, Trey Murphy III, Herb Jones, Quentin Grimes, Jonathan Kuminga. It's not a spoiler really, but Jalen Suggs didn't crack the top five, which is fine. But he didn't actually make the honourable mentions list either. And Mikey, do you feel this is fair when you look at some of the players who are on there that Suggs doesn't make an honourable mention, or do you think he's still got a lot to do yet?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, a lot of these sort of things are all. I mean, if you look at his stats from last year, 9.9 points per game, 42% from the field, 32% from three, 72% from the line, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. His numbers don't stand out, and a lot of these rankings and a lot of these people just look at stats and just look at names and look. It's been a very stop-start 2 years for Suggs. He's obviously dealt with injuries. Um, Again, I already talked about it earlier about his improvements from year one to year two, but that still wasn't a big enough jump. He still has a lot to do to be in that conversation. Now we know from watching him that he has the ability to still be a top 4 or 5 pick. He still has that talent. That's where he was taken. Um, but I think, and if you look at the honourable mentions, Jalen Green, Sengun, I mean, they're two players that are getting more of an opportunity to play. They're getting more minutes. Their roles bigger than Jalen Suggs. Trey Murphy's playing for a pretty good New Orleans team. So good teams are always going to get the benefit of the doubt because you're playing with winning players. Herb Jones as well. Quentin Grimes is a New York player. We know how much the big markets get more favourable mentions than players like the players that play for Orlando, for example. Um, but and Jonathan Kuminga, I mean, I can't see how Jonathan Kuminga has more of a positive contribution to the Golden State Warriors than Jalen Suggs does to the Orlando Magic. Jalen Suggs has more of an impact for me. Um, so yes, you can argue he should be an honourable mention, but if you look at his stats, then they're not jumping off the page at them. So you can't really argue that. But in terms of the top five, Scotty Barnes, Franz, Josh Giddey, Mobley, Cade, I don't think anyone could really argue that. For me, I wouldn't have Cade one. I think, again, a bit of a stop start. He missed a lot of last season. How's he going to come back from that this year? Detroit are adding more pieces. There could be a bit more pressure on him to come back. For me, I would have Evan Mobley at 1 and Franz at 2 if that was me ranking it, and probably Cade at 3. But yeah, that's how I would look at it.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go with the top five. Like for me, I wouldn't have had Scotty Barnes in it, and I know it's talking about ceilings, and I understand the concept of ceiling. But I also happen to think that Jalen Green and Sengun, both of them would be ahead of Scotty Barnes for me.
Hmm.
And I'm
Yeah.
not being awful. I know he's predicted to have a bounce back, and I can see the appeal of Scotty Barnes. I just think, based on last season, what we saw, if you take it over 2 years, and I was redrafting, and even looking just at ceilings, I would pick either of those ahead of Barnes for me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Josh Giddey was at 3 and Franz was at 4. So, do we think the age of Giddey being a year and a bit younger than Franz is what's got him into the third spot there?
Right, I'm going to say I think that age is perhaps a consideration, but I think probably that it's OKC did better than most of us expected last season. So they got more exposure. And people who write these lists, that's what they watch. They watch the teams that's on the TV. Franz announced himself to the world today. And I think I've said plenty about that already. I think the commentary I put this into our WhatsApp group, if you remember, and this summed up people's in the media their knowledge of Franz. And the commentator in the Germany-Latvia game, this is what he said. Franz Wagner enters the game. Normally he'd be starting, but he's been out injured. What will he be like? He'll be used to this, though, with having been in and out injured in the NBA. It's a guy that did 79 games in his rookie season and 80 in his second season last year. How's that being in and out injured? And that says it all. You don't need to go any further. But if that's the level of knowledge and you are commentating on the World Cup, don't need to say anymore. You don't know. You probably know your subject, but you don't know some of the individuals involved. And you don't know how reliable certain players are. You can make an argument for Josh Giddey. I think he's a very good player. But I would put Franz above him, personally.
Franz is, I would say, one of the most slept-on players in the
Yep.
NBA. And things might start to change this weekend if they haven't already. It's an interesting one. And the Bleacher Report also, another article in it, because we love it so much, discusses the top 10 stars of the next 5 seasons. And in reverse order, we had Cade at 10, Devin Booker at 9, Scoot at 8, SGA at 7, Anthony Edwards at 6, Wembanyama at 5. We've got Giannis, Tatum, Jokic, and Luka Doncic at number 1. And the honourable mentions were Joel Embiid, Fox, Mitchell Mobley, and Ja Morant. Paolo makes the also considered list. Franz does not. And the others also considered are Bam Adebayo, LaMelo, Desmond Bain, Scotty Barnes, Jaylen Brown, Brunson, Garland, Halliburton, Chet, Brandon Ingram, Jaren Jackson Jr., Jamal Murray, Sabonis, Siakam, Kat, Zion, and Trae Young. Paul, what's your thoughts on Paolo's positioning and Franz not even making that considered?
Okay. So the previous list, redrafting, Franz goes before Scotty Barnes. In the same forum, they put Scotty Barnes ahead of Franz. For me, if you're going to put Barnes in, then you have to put Franz into that consideration also. I can understand how he's not in the top list. No, I'm fine. I can understand it. But it's the same as the last answer. If you don't watch, then you don't know. 2 seasons running, Franz has been overlooked. People woke up to what is destined to be a great career. I think he suffers from being alongside Paolo, and that's despite Paolo being overlooked in his rookie season. As we said, rookie of the year. We've spoken about this at length. But Paolo gets more attention of our squad. As we said last week, these things are they're people's predictions. They're there to be discussed. They're there to cause controversy. Look, Scoot and Wemby, they're the eye raisers for me. Even before they even touch the ball, and you're putting Wembanyama ahead of Anthony Edwards. Really? You're putting him ahead of Ja Morant? No. Behave. You're putting him ahead of Joel Embiid, for Christ's sake. Whether he stays in Philly or whether he moves, no. It's just wrong.
I think their worry with Embiid was how his health would hold up over that time period. But I agree.
Yeah.
Like for me as well, when you look at the list of the also considered, Chet, as much as I think he's going to be good, hasn't touched a ball.
Yeah.
Really.
I was going to ask this question. You include Scoot and you include Wemby and you include Chet. If they'd done this list last season, would Paolo have got that consideration as the number 1 pick? I'm going to say no, because he didn't get any attention as the number 1 pick. We were ignored for national games. The only game that we were going to get nationally was the one against OKC. And I think, did that get pulled once Chet was out injured?
Yeah.
Says it all.
It's hard to disagree with what you're saying, Mikey. Is there anything you'd like to add to Paul's commentary there, which I think
Your
was
blood boiled on it.
Well, I want, first of all, I'm not even going to talk about Paolo and France. I want to know how SGA, they got 7th, who was, arguably a top 5 MVP candidate last season, who's only going to get better in the next 5 years. I don't understand that. If we're looking at it, Doncic at 1, it's hard to disagree with that for me, but he needs to start winning if you think it, because at the moment you've got a 2-time MVP and an NBA Finals champion behind him. Jason Tatum, I get, but I still think Giannis is better. Anthony Edwards, I think, is going to be a star. I've been saying that for quite a while. I think he's going to be a top 5 player for me. I think the World Cup, from certainly bits that I've watched, he was the USA's best player, or certainly for a lot of those games. He just stands out head and shoulders over everybody else at the moment for me. So I don't understand that. Wemby at 5, man, that's some reaching at this stage, because I'm not quite sure it's gonna. I'm not sure he's going to hit the ground running like people think he's gonna do. And I think it's Scoot, who's 6'1", undersized guard. I think he's going to have to play what Russell Westbrook did to be in that consideration when you think Russ in his prime. Devin Booker, I probably wouldn't have Devin Booker in the top 10 if I'm honest. I'm not sure Devin Booker's a top 10 star now, let alone in 5 years' time. Cade I get, but again, he's got a lot to prove. We're all going to be biased. We can all say Paolo over. I'm going to say Paolo over Booker, Paolo over Henderson. At the moment, Paolo over Wembyama. I think it's hard to put anybody. I think it's hard to put him above any of the other 6. But yeah, like Paul said, the fact that Franz isn't even in there and you got players like, and this no hate against anyone, Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns. How have we got Karl Anthony Towns over Franz? I mean, come on. Zion, I get, it's still there's still a lot of hope for him. But look, if you look at most of these players, I think the only ones you could probably take off that list, LaMelo Ball, not on a winning team. Tyrese Halliburton, they weren't. He was great last year, but the Pacers weren't necessarily. But most of those players are players that play for winning teams. And again, like you said, they're the players that a lot of these national people watch because that's who they get exposed to. We're all going to be biased. Franz should be on the list, no doubt. Paolo, for me, has to be a top 10 player in the next 5 years. I can't see how he can't be at this point. If you look at his rookie year compared to history, and he's right out there with LeBron and KD, and you got Cade at 10. Cade has not done what Paolo Banchero did in his rookie year. Do you know what I mean? I just don't get it.
Do you know what shocked me about that list?
Go on.
Austin Reeves isn't on there. How? How can you have a list that doesn't include Austin Reeves?
He's on holiday with Taylor Horton Tucker, that's why.
Honestly, I was expecting to see his name there. I'm not saying he should be, by the way. I'm just saying it's the overhype again. And he's played really well.
Trae Young. Can you see Trae Young being better than Paolo in 5 years' time? I just can't see it. Like, Brandon Ingram. I think Brandon Ingram is as good as he's probably ever going to be at this stage.
Yep.
Paolo should be better than Brandon Ingram in 5 years' time. Like Paul's already said earlier about the World Cup, Jaren Jackson Jr. Paolo's played better defensively than the reigning defensive player of the year. don't get me wrong. There's loads of good players, and it's all subjective, and we're all biased. But man, I just don't understand how Paolo is not in there. I just don't get it. Scoot Henderson is not going to do what Paolo did in his rookie year. I can tell you that for a fact.
Scoot Henderson though is seen as the Ja Morant. That's his what you could get Ja Morant here without the firearms. That's kind of But Scoot Henderson, because of that, Ja Morant's now dropped out the top 10 when he was being seen as the face of the NBA before that incident. Now, it's not good. It's not a good look, but it doesn't mean that Ja Morant's not talented.
Here's the other one we're not even talking about. De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah.
I'm putting Scoot Henderson above De'Aaron Fox in 5 years' time. Not after this season. Yeah.
Fox broke out massively, didn't he?
Oh yeah, and rightly so. And they were great to watch this season. Unfortunately, back in November when I was there, but yeah, it was Siakam. 5 years' time, the bloke's 31 now.
Jamal
What's
Murray.
he going to be at? What's he going to be at 36 years old? You think Siakam at 36 years old is going to be as good as Paolo? I don't think so. It's just laughable. I'd love it if G was here because he'd be all over this tonight.
You know what? When I was putting this together, I was like, I think you're going to be seeing smoke above Wales. You're going to see that there's some kind of fire. There will be that much of like smoke coming out of G's ears.
You know, when I wrote last week's discussion points, it was always going to be that G had got the guard position because of Markel not being anywhere in the consideration. This, as I read it, had G written all over it when you wrote this deliberately expecting G to be sat here. Unfortunately, he's took ill. So sorry that you've not had
I know.
the explosion, the fireworks that you were kind of hoping. But man,
I was going to send a plate
it's
of
such BS, isn't
to
it?
Cardiff at about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Bit of red meat, few Red Bulls for G, and say, eat this before you go on, and just let it go from there.
Such BS, man. But there we go.
We've lost out this week. We've lost out this week with no G massively.